Okay, so with that being said, I feel I need to add a number 7 in here.
Okay.
I don't, and you know what? No, fuck that. I'm not gonna
Okay.
put it as number 7. I'm putting it as number 1 because I
Yep.
feel like this is a bigger problem than any of these 6. Is for a small business owner, the number of times I would talk to a bunch of SMBs and they'd be like, "Oh, does my card look good enough?" Or "Does my business card stand out if I go to this event?" Or, am I focused? Like, why is my click-through rate not so high on my ads? I think the number one problem is that for small SMBs who don't really have a knack for marketing, let's be real, is they focus on the wrong things. Right, so they're not focusing on the right things of some element of tying everything they're doing to some level of revenue. All right, so for example, if a business owner is talking to me for half an hour around, oh, what should my business card design look like I don't know what to say to that. Like I could just I want to be able to just say straight out, like, look, you're doing it wrong. Like, I don't know why the hell you're focusing half an hour on this when you're being billed $150 an hour or $200 an hour.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest problems. Like, you stop focusing on the wrong things or things that are so minuscule that don't really matter.
But let me chime in here.
Yeah.
As the more senior of the two, I would say it's important to kind of acknowledge, right? Acknowledge, because a business owner have this creative flair, and so the design of a business card is important.
Yeah.
So from a customer relationship, customer experience, it's important to kind of have the right conversations about whatever's important to the customer, to your client, but to really provide them with the options to reconsider ways to refocus.
Yeah.
That's going to bring more material impact to the business. That, to me, is one of those lessons you learn, because what's important to you, and if you are a consultant, doesn't mean that that's what's important to your customer. Right?
Yeah.
You're trying to make sure and to suggest and make recommendations and present options that is going to guide them down the right path. That's the challenge.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're saying that, like, building that relationship is a huge part of.
Absolutely, because you have to build trust, right? So if you're gonna, say, "Oh, yeah, why are you focusing on a business card design?" Because the reaction that the owner may have is going to be, "Well, it's important to me. I want to make sure that it represents the business and my brand, so it is important." So who are you to say that it's not? Mm-hmm. Right? So you have to at least be listening to and kind of seeing those cues to know when you should kind of say, understand, appreciate that it is important, but help me understand how that's going to materially impact your top line or your bottom line. I think you're facilitating the right conversations that way, rather than coming in and saying, no, you shouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. That would be my suggestion, right? As the more mature.
So then, let's talk about that for a little bit in terms of, because that kind of ties into the building a team element of it, right? So let's say a young entrepreneur, let's say whatever, in their 30s, and I'm just gonna turn 30, who's looking to build a team. Like, who should that first hire be?
Wow, what a question. That's cool. I'm actually going through this right now, helping a young, small startup looking to scale. The goal for this company is 2x revenue, top line revenue over the next 12 months. So it's a stretch goal. It's certainly achievable. And one of the first conversations we're having is around the first hire. So there's 2 partners. What's the next hire should be? And, I could tell you, hire the standard suggestion or recommendation is hire the best personnel that you can afford, which holds true. But there's so many other factors, right? Like, if you're a services-based business, I would argue that you may even want to stretch kind of the comp plan to be able to find somebody who can hit the ground running. Because if they're automatically billable, then it becomes a bit of a no-brainer, right? That you can recoup the cost of the headcount plus by generating incremental revenue. But if that's not your strategy, maybe you're making investment in terms of a product-based business, then the hire is it a CTO level? Is it truly an engineer that's really going to help kind of build that foundation of product from technical standpoint. But it is a tough. I would say, if I had to kind of, if somebody held a gun to my head today and said, what should be the next hire? It really should be, somebody who's going to bring value, who's going to bring value immediately, who you can obviously afford, because if you can't afford it, then you're going to have a very short runway to be able to preserve your business. And it's about somebody, and I would say somebody that fits into the culture that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing, because as a startup, if you have a handful of employees, what I've seen and what I've witnessed is that every hire matters.
Yeah.
Whether they're the admin assistant to the project coordinator, PM, what have you, senior leadership roles, every hire matters, and it's only amplified in a small business. So,
let me ask you this:
okay,
contractor or full-time hire to start?
If you can afford a contractor, I think it's a quick and easy way to prove out your concept, right? To prove out that this is the type of hire that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you can find somebody that you can hire on a short-term contract, maybe it's a temp to perm, where it's temporary with the idea, the vision, that they're going to be transitioned into a full-time role. I think that's a pretty safe bet if you can find some people who would.
What if that person is you're like an international hire? Like you find someone amazing in
like a remote
in Mexico.
Like remote?
Yeah, like a remote contract.
Yeah, see, I'm of the old school of, I love to have people congregate into a single spot, whether it's a collab space or whatnot. I like the vibe that it creates. I like the conversations that you have. The classic water cooler conversations. A lot of people, you can learn a great deal based on those informal conversations, more so than a scheduled meeting with set agendas and so on. So if you have a remote, worker, it's very difficult to feel that, to get into that culture and get into that vibe. That's my opinion.
Even with all the video calls and all that stuff going on.
But as well I do, in-person conversations is so much, it's easier to catch the cues, right?
Yeah.
The body language, because, we've all received emails where it feels like, oh man, this is, they're blasting me, but really that wasn't the intent, right? So, and it's the same with teleconferences and so on. Yeah, there's tons of technology that exists to kind of help bring the teams together, regardless of geography.
Yeah.
But my mentality, my old school kind of thought is, there's nothing that can beat having everybody physically together and just kind of, working together that way.
See, that I like, even, it might not be an old school mentality. It might just be, even from my experience, being in person and having that physical presence just means so much more, because not only body language and communication and tone and what you're saying, but just being there, even if you are remote and you, let's say, fly down or something, and you're actually present, it means that you're invested, right, in the conversation, in the meeting, in the importance of the business, so on and so forth.
And you're available for those ad hoc conversations.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I used to live in Halifax and work for a company out of Toronto.
Yeah.
And I have to say, one of the contributing factors why I left was because I didn't feel part of the organization. Mm-hmm. It was always this after, and mind you, they didn't have a remote work policy and so on, so they really weren't structured to cater to that kind of structure. But it was an arrangement that was made and agreed upon. But I really didn't feel part of the organization because I was remote. There was a slight time zone change difference as well. But, I have to say, I didn't, there's all sorts of things happening, or you're trying to reach somebody and you don't know if they're in, whether they're not at their desk, they're at a different meeting, what have you. So it created, for me personally, this sense of disconnection from the rest of the company.